Hi there, and thanks for listening. My name is Daniel Kringer, and this is the SkanFest podcast, an interview series for the Skaneateles Festival, a summer concert series based in the Finger Lakes region of upstate New York. In these talks, we are spending time getting to know our visiting artists who travel the world making music at the very top of their field. Clarinetist, composer, and improviser Kinan Azmeh has gained international recognition for his distinctive voice across diverse musical genres. Originally from Damascus, Syria, Azmeh brings his music to all corners of the world, working with ensembles like the New York Philharmonic, London Philharmonic, Bavarian Radio Orchestra, and Qatar Philharmonic, and collaborating with the likes of Yo-Yo Ma and Daniel Barenboim, just to drop a few names. He is here with the festival for a series of concerts, and we are happy to have him on to talk. Thanks for making time, Kinan.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Thanks. So we're going to get back to your career because there's a lot more that we can talk about there than I initially mentioned. But I'd like to start by talking a little bit about your background. So where have you come from and how did you find music?
That's a great question. How did I find music is a wonderful question.
Yeah.
I was born in Damascus. I was born into a household that valued culture, everything cultural.
Mm-hmm.
So I was already in a very privileged situation that my parents were very open for culture. And that reflected in what we ate at home, the music we listened to, the literature that we had at home. We had a huge library. And so this is the actual background is in Damascus, but within this kind of context.
Yeah.
Started playing the clarinet at a very young age. Well, 7. I started on the violin first.
Uh-huh.
That didn't go very well.
Just didn't enjoy it?
No, I had issues with, I'm left-handed. So playing with my right hand was not, it wasn't, I don't know, it wasn't really, it didn't make me feel good. But also my dad did his research and it was suggested to him that maybe for a left-handed person, it's easier to switch to an even-handed instrument. The way it was called.
Was he a musician as well?
He plays violin on an amateur level. And how I found music, when my parents sent my sister and I to like evening, classes twice a week. Mm-hmm. It was mainly like an additional homework that I could have done without, to be honest. It's not that I fell in love with it from the beginning.
Yeah.
But I think the switching point was when my parents relearned instruments as my sister and I were learning instruments. So my dad picked up his violin again and my mom picked up classical guitar. My sister was studying classical guitar.
Yeah.
So I think that was maybe the most important thing that happened is believing that, it's a normal family activity. That's what people do.
Playing.
And I thought every family does the same, like, twice a week or 3, times a week, the family plays. And every time they had people over for dinner or something, we were like the hired for free band, we just play.
Pull out the instruments.
And we love that, yeah.
Wow.
So I think that's how music became an essential part of my life without me knowing it.
Sure.
Did my, fast forward, went to university.
And you
I
started...
studied music and engineering, both.
Yeah.
I did both. And then for my grad school, I ended up applying for music schools only. And that's when I came to the US.
Right.
In 2001.
Yeah. So... You touched a little bit on it, but is there anything else that sort of drew you to clarinet specifically? You mentioned your dad sort of helped guide you toward an instrument that was going to work for you. But did you feel anything more for that instrument in particular? Or?
It wasn't the instrument.
Early enough?
It's very hard.
Yeah.
Unless, sometimes you hear stories of people who heard the sound of an instrument and they fell in love with it.
Sure, yeah.
It wasn't my case.
Yeah.
I was not surrounded by clarinet players anyway to listen to. So it was more of a practical reason why I chose the clarinet. It was not the violin. Okay, what else is there where I can use both hands to the same degree of difficulty?
Yeah.
And I think what helped a lot was my older cousin, 2 years older than I am, who was kind of a role model, played a role model in my life. He taught me how to play soccer and went camping. And he was the older brother that I didn't have. And he played the clarinet. So I'm like, sure, I'll do that.
I'll do that too.
But now, looking back at it retrospectively, I think the similarities of the clarinet sound to the human voice, I think was something that maybe I felt subconsciously. I think the clarinet, maybe other wind players will disagree, but the clarinet maybe has the closest range to the human voice, like in octaves, and also dynamically speaking, as soft and as loud. So maybe that's what also moved me.
Yeah.
And I remember clearly the moment where I realized, like, oh, I can imagine doing this for many, many years to come.
Well, let me ask you, sort of in addition to the instrumental stuff, the composition and the improvisation has sort of become a huge part of what you do. So how did that get started?
When I started studying music, it was mainly, the so-called Western classical repertoire. I don't agree with that terminology because I think, when I was studying Bach, Brahms, and Mozart and Beethoven, that was also my repertoire. I think it's a human heritage that the world should share. But just now, for like the simplification of the use of the terms, what I studied was what's considered Western classical repertoire.
Right.
And mainly by composers who are dead since a long time.
Yeah.
And I was encouraged by my dad early on to both to compose and improvise. I mean, to give you a little background, I think I was maybe 7 or 8 years old when my dad brought with him from a trip to England a computer, a mini personal computer called Sinclair ZX Spectrum. I will never forget that name. Its memory was 64 kilobytes or something, And he told my sister and I, he said, you guys should learn how to program. And we said, like, why? And he said something that I only understood like maybe 20 years later. He said, during your time, you have to choose between being programmers or being programmed.
Oh, wow.
And for him, and he was right. I think now the world has that split even more clearly than ever. And I think being a programmer means you have some say in terms of what you want to express, what you want to play, not only play the ideas of others. So that's where the composition and the improvisation came to the equation. From that same philosophy, my dad encouraged me to compose and improvise.
Yeah. Fantastic.
And once I did it, I was like super addicted to it.
Yeah.
So it just stayed with me.
So you kind of referred to this with the clarinet. I'm curious to know if there was a moment or like a specific person that helped you choose to pursue this as a vocation as you got more and more serious about it.
I don't think I've ever been in a situation where somebody says, you have to do this for the rest of your life. For your life.
Sure, yeah.
And I would never tell anybody that either. I like this approach to the arts where it just happens. It happens, you feel it. And until now, and I'm a professional musician, that's what I do. I don't imagine myself just doing that. It's a facet of what I do. It's certainly the best way for me to express myself and to share with what I have with the world. But things just happen so naturally, in a way that I never felt I had to decide. When I did my undergrad, both engineering, electronics, and music, and that was in 2 different universities, I had to go back and forth. I noticed my natural gravity was to hang out with the musicians. And hanging out is a big part of it. Actually, how you make these choices when you're 18 or 17. And I guess I was encouraged by people, my family, but also my mentors, my friends. But it was never like, this is your career. And I don't think of artistic expressions in terms of careers. Still not.
Yeah.
I mean, I love what I do. I'm happy with what I do. And it's amazing that I make a living out of doing what I do.
So are there any musicians or maybe figures more in general that are living or from the past that inspire you with your ideas for creation? Or
it's hard. Maybe I was trying to make that point.
I suppose.
No. In an earlier comment, which is things happen. It's a stream of inspiration. It's very hard to isolate one person. Somebody believe in the continuum. That things happen for million factors, and it's never one thing. Of course, I can name few people, like my parents have been incredibly supportive. The neighbors downstairs and upstairs in our apartment in Damascus, who did not yell at my parents for allowing their kid to practice the clarinet for 4 hours a day. And it doesn't sound great in the beginning.
Sure,
you know?
oh yeah.
So sometimes you give credit to people who actually simply didn't stop you, you know? And the dean of the Higher Institute of Music in Damascus also gave me lots of support. Sulh El-Wadi is his name. And my clarinet teachers. But it goes beyond, because now where I look for what inspired me throughout my life, it's not only people in the music world.
Yeah.
There are lots of people who had nothing to do with music who inspire me in terms of artistic expression and why we do what we do.
Yeah. So what do you spend time listening to, as far as what goes into your ears? Any genre, inside or outside the
I
field,
listen
I guess.
to I'm sure maybe you hear this answer all the time. I listen to a huge variety of stuff.
Yeah, it's true.
And I mean, of course, I don't like the use of the word genre either.
Okay.
Because I listen to like electronic music, like heavy metal stuff, rock and roll, jazz, music of the worlds, you know, which is the biggest category of all.
Sure, yeah.
But I find myself, getting addicted to stuff. So for 1 month, I'll be listening to just one album on loop. That's an issue that I have, and I'm trying to deal with that.
Well,
it's nice actually when you dig vertically into something. You know, when you listen to a piece more than once, the time you listen to it and you still enjoy it, that means that this piece has depth. You know, and the only way to discover if a piece of music has depth is actually to keep listening to it over and over. So I try to do that. But it's always a huge variety. Now, as a professional musician, what I enjoy listening to the most is music by people I can talk to. People I can have a discussion about the music with. And that has been incredible.
So what do you like about making music?
What do I like about making music?
Yeah, sort of what gives it meaning to you, I suppose.
It will be a similar question if I say, what do you like about eating? You know, it's really the same for me.
Doing it. Yeah.
I cannot imagine it. Actually, no, I can because I do imagine living a life where I'm not actively like practicing music. You know, I find lots of things that I enjoy doing in life besides music. You know, if you ask me, would you like to go on a 1 year tour or take a year off and just go and learn how to windsurf? I tell you now, I would go to windsurf. So it doesn't mean one is more important, but I like to think about life in a wholesome way. You know, that life has more than just one aspect.
Yeah.
But certainly, what music has helped me do is to self-express in the best way possible. My most sincere secrets, stories, life events, everything have been described in the music I'm making, more than the way I talk about them.
Yeah,
and that's what I love music for. And I think me also playing as a performer, it's very empowering to play. It's very empowering, and you feel very lucky when I'm on stage. You stand there. They're waiting for you to just blow some air into this piece of wood and metal, you know, and it just becomes alive, right?
Sure, yeah.
And all these people, they respect you so much that everybody's staying quiet, just waiting for you to say what you have to say. We are one of very, very few people who have that luxury, you know, and you feel incredibly empowered when you do that. And also, it's a wonderful way of connecting with people. You start playing a concert for, let's say, 2,000 people who are total strangers. Halfway in the performance, you are no longer strangers, you know? And there's this kind of connecting with people and humanity at large is what I love music for.
Great. So getting into some of your work, you spend a lot of time creating we talked about already a little bit how improvisation plays a really big role in your creation. So I'm curious to know how that process works for you when you're collaborating with other people maybe, or coming up with an idea for something new. Where do you find, I guess, the start of something like that?
Every start is different. And I don't see also the differences between, being a composer, instrumentalist, and an improviser. And in that way, I try to find inspiration in people who have done that, and we forget that they did that. I always bring the example of Bach and Mozart, for example. We know them today as instrumentalists, as composers, but back in the time, they were instrumentalists, they were conductors, and they were improvisers. They were a musician rather than being just a violinist.
Sure,
you know. And I try to follow that model. How one can use music as a tool for self-expression in its widest sense. And so when I have to sit down to write a piece of music, it's the same thing that goes to my mind when I'm improvising over a piece, or when I'm learning a piece by somebody else that was written for me or written by a dead composer. Dead composer. It's funny, like I'm like putting them in this category. I don't mean that, but
Sure.
Composer from the classical period. As an artist, to be able to do something meaningful, you have to have three things. You have to have an idea to express. You want to express, or you have the urgency of expressing. You have to have the tools, and the tool in my case is the clarinet, or my pen and paper when I'm composing. You have to have the skills to use the tool to express what you want to express. So the idea is the most important. So my first page, whether I'm writing a piece or learning a piece, is what am I trying to say? Once I have that, the rest is super easy. And so I always depart from the concept. And this concept sometimes is actually a melodic thing, or like a musical vocabulary departing point, which I can sometimes, I have a sketchbook, always it's with me here. I always write ideas on it. I leave million, what do you call them? Voice memos, on my phone. You hear me, like, and then it's hard to know, like, what was I thinking, That's functions as a departing point as well for many pieces.
Are there any themes that you find yourself sort of running into across pieces as you've been writing for now quite a while?
Yes, I always thought, there are two. Also, that's something that I mention often. There are two main thoughts when it comes to music making. One of them is, or artistic expression. One of them is, it's the artist's role to reflect on the world around them. So they mirror what's happening outside.
Sure.
Another philosophy suggests that the artist's role is to recreate the world in the most ideal way according to them. So it's not a reflection, and not a direct reflection, but rather a counter approach to what life should be. My personal philosophy has always been that you do art to experience emotions that you don't have the luxury of experiencing in real life, to go beyond of what's available. So in that sense, my music changed according to what I've been going through. In the beginning, my music was, I think, more abstract in nature, which allowed me to experiment with these emotions. Following the Syrian war, the uprising and then war from 2011, lots of my music have been about that. Have been about home. Not only home, Syria specifically, how one can relate to home in a time of atrocities. That became an important topic for me. And then a few years after that, I realized that an artist should never be held hostage by tragedies either. So I started to write pieces that are more abstract in nature, because I wanted to practice that same freedom that people also demanded in the streets, And so it's all goes up and down. There's not one way. What's the only thing that is constant is how you keep the route between what's in your head and to what's in the audience ear as short as possible. So it doesn't go through lots of artificial making. I want the ideas that I'm expressing to be as genuine and as honest as possible.
So I want to ask a little bit about some of your collaborative experiences. Seeing you on stage working with an orchestra is for me as well, seeing you perform this past weekend is very different to seeing other soloists, where it seems like you're really kind of having a dialogue. Very cool. And then there's other experiences like the Silk Road Ensemble. You have an Arabic jazz quartet. You have a trio that you work with. So I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about your approach to collaboration with maybe familiar or new people and maybe some specific experiences.
I think, the way I'm trying to describe art making for myself is what I also love to see in the people I collaborate with.
Yeah.
Also people who have ideas, who they want to share, and people who are open. I try to stay as open as possible when it comes to collaborations. Why do I say as open as possible, not just open? Because also you have some kind of artistic approach to things you'd like to also to keep, even while conversing with somebody musically. And this is the magic combination that I like. People who are super flexible artistically, and they have the skills and the ideas and all what I mentioned before, but also people who have the flexibility and also some kind of stubbornness that this is how they like things to go. I like that.
Yeah.
And it's a magic combination of the two. And, when the way you describe the work with the orchestra as a dialogue, it's a dialogue. I mean, that's the whole idea of playing with somebody else. Yeah. Is you say something, I say something, you listen, you say something, I listen. Music, we have an added situation is both of us can talk at the same time. While we can understand each other, while we're able to self-express, and we immediately adjust on the fly whose line is more important, whose line is less important. Do I support you? Do you support me? And this is, again, actually, it's a huge plus for music making. And this aspect, I think, is fundamental in changing societies, really. I think making music together, chamber music, as an example, can change societies. I fundamentally believe in this. Sorry, we went off topic a little bit, but back to the collaborations. Yeah, they all fit within the same frame for me. Yeah, it's an ensemble that has an identity, but their identity is also accommodating. It can invite other identities to come on board. So speaking of a specific collaboration, which I'm curious about, so you recently wrote an opera that's performed fully in Arabic, Songs for Days to Come, which premiered in Germany. And I'm just curious to know how that opportunity came about. I worked on a song cycle about maybe 8 years ago. This is in a Syria, in a post uprising and war Syria. I found myself being interested in what the Syrian poets were talking about. I never paid attention to poetry in my life, even though it's the most important art form in the Arab world is poetry. I mean, poets fill stadiums in the Arab world. It's kind of insane. Yeah. And and I thought, if I want to learn the Syrian story of what's happening in Syria now, the only way to do it is to listen to 24 million Syrians telling their stories. That's the only way you can really summarize the history of a nation within a time frame. And since I cannot do that, I thought maybe the best way to recreate Syria or to reimagine the Syria I love, maybe that should be through the words of its poets. So I went and I checked all what the Syrian contemporary poets were writing, and I chose 15 poems, and they became the core of this opera. I commissioned 2 of these poets to write kind of a libretto that encompasses all these 15 poems with their different topics. And this festival in Germany that I'm artist in residence for many years, it's called the Morgenland Festival in Osnabrück. They asked me, would you like to turn this into an opera? I'm like, sure, let's do it. And I was like, it was my first opera. I loved it because it's a total art form. There's everything. Yeah. And you have to think of everything. And the result was great. Also, it's part of what I wanted to do it. Not only It's not a Syria specific story because I think the story is universal, but also to celebrate Arabic as a language that can be sung. That was very meaningful for me too.
So your music, but also you yourself, it seems, sort of reflect a meeting and blending of Western and Eastern aesthetics, in music. And I'm curious to know your thoughts on the role of that intersection in your life and your career, and maybe even how the clarinet fits in and whatnot. Some things you've already referenced to, but I'm curious to know a little bit more. Your thoughts on that?
Like I said, I don't like the East-West kind of.
Okay. Yeah.
No. I mean, I'm glad that you mentioned it because it allows me to to tell you what my thoughts about it. Like when I play, I'm from Damascus now, living in New York for 24 years. Actually, half of my life, I've lived that in Damascus. Exactly half is in New York.
Sure.
I always been the New Yorker in Damascus, the Damascene in New York. Right? Now I'm more interested in being the Damascene in Damascus and the New Yorker in New York. I'm more interested in being part of the local situation anywhere I go, including here.
Yeah.
Where you want to be the local. You don't want to be the imported exotic fruit, you know?
Yeah.
And when I take my music, for example, so I'm in New York, I'm the guy from the East, and when I'm in Damascus, I'm the guy from the West.
Yeah.
What happens when I take my music to Japan? Do I become the Western just because Syria happens to be to the west of Japan? I think we are in a post-colonial world where even like you cannot even call the Middle East anymore. It's the Middle East according to who?
Right.
Everywhere is the center of the world.
Yeah.
That's what I think. And my work has revolved around the multitude of identities. And that comes from a belief that all of us, or at least none of us, is a pure product of one pure culture. That simply doesn't exist. It doesn't exist scientifically, it doesn't exist philosophically, it doesn't exist in any way where somebody says like, I am the only person who's affected by only this. There's no way. So I think I'm a natural product of a globalized world where everything is at your disposal. You can see everything. The difference is to be able to speak several musical languages, you have to spend lifetimes doing that. I spent my lifetime studying how to play Brahms, Beethoven, and Bach. But then I need another lifetime to be super fluent in the music of my own culture, whether it's jazz in New York or Arabic, Armenian, Kurdish, Syriac music in Syria.
Sure. Yeah.
So since you have only one lifetime, you have to learn as much as you can. And by doing that, I think you dig vertically into the core of that world where East and West don't mean anything. You know?
Yeah.
That's how I see myself fitting in the world. And my musical, whether performances or compositions or performances, I think they naturally reflect these multitude of identities. Maybe my music can be best described as a music that is inspired by so many cultures without being limited by any of its traditions. Maybe.
Wow.
I don't know.
Sounds good to me.
At least I try not to be limited by that, but also to be free.
No, it makes sense.
Using somebody else's vocabulary, you have to know that vocabulary very well.
Yeah, of course. So you're here presenting a number of events with the festival. We've just had you at Agnello's Vineyards with the orchestra this past Saturday. You're joining piano trio Claremont Trio on Thursday, August 15th this week at the First Presbyterian Church of Skaneateles. Can you just talk about your part of the program? You have
Absolutely,
some music being performed and whatnot. Yeah.
Like I'm reunited by my friends from the Claremont Trio, which I haven't seen since 22 years, since our Julia days.
Wow.
Julia, who's the co-artistic director of the festival.
Yeah.
When I saw her like 3 days ago was the first time we saw each other since 22 years, so it was really exciting.
And you were at Juilliard at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the concert features. I'm involved only in the first half. which includes a piece of mine that I've written during the pandemic called "On Solitude," essays on solitude and other ambiguous emotions. Solitude not as a negative thing. What does it mean to be in solitude or to enjoy your own solitude? Which I think many of us thought about during the pandemic. And how do you enjoy that aspect of being alone? Not lonely, but being alone. It's a piece in 3 movements, and then we're playing the Khachaturian piano, clarinet, violin trio. And it's a piece that I did my doctorate dissertation on. So it's a piece that I know inside out, and I love the piece. And also it's another example of how people use several musical vocabularies within one context. And it features a new piece that I've written for the Claremont Trio without me. Gravitas is the name of the piece. And it's a piece inspired by the gravity and the weight of a very traditional rhythm in the Arab world. And how over the course of the piece, how difficult it is to mess around with that groove. It's a short piece that the festival commissioned. So it's going to be the world premiere, which is exciting.
Yes. Great.
Yeah.
Well,
it's exciting, and also I get nervous before a premiere.
Do you?
No, of course, because it's a new piece. And it's the first time I'm going to hear it live. And but exciting and terrifying at the same time. Just putting it out there.
Just the right mixture, right? Well, fantastic. So Kinan Azmeh is with us for a week of concerts. You can see him on August 15th this week in Skaneateles at the church. Thanks so much for coming in, Kinan.
Thank you.
It's a great
Thanks
conversation.
for having me. Thank you.
And folks, you can see us again on the next episode.
All right.
Hey there, and thanks so much for tuning in. You are listening to a clip from Wedding, a track on Kinan's upcoming album, Kinan Azmeh and City Band, live in Berlin. The album is set to release in April 2025.